Thank you so much for joining me today on the life stage. We're here to talk about how living things can inspire robotics. But first, please can you introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about what you do?
Sure. So thank you for having me today. I'm Mostafa Hassanalian. I'm Associate Professor of Mechanical Engineering at New Mexico Tech in the United States. So I am doing research on drones and biomimicry. We are trying to inspire from nature to increase the efficiency of robotic systems in general. So what we have been looking at since last 6 years is looking at the behavior of animals to get an idea that how, for example, we can learn from swarm behavior of birds or huddling of penguins to come up with the new solutions for energy management or heat management and other applications like for optimization techniques. So there are varieties of applications in engineering that we can inspire from nature in order to have more efficient way to design, to simulate, as well as to come up with new areas of biomimicry and an autonomous system, or in general like robotics. So that has been one part. The other part is based on mechanism or locomotion. We have been looking at different locomotion mechanisms of animals and natural species, from the plants or seeds to the insects or underwater or aquatics animals, as well as birds, to come up with the new and novel locomotion mechanisms that can be used for robotic system and in general drones, which is my main area of research.
Wow, incredible. So all sorts of different life forms are inspiring you in your work.
Exactly. So this can be different natural organisms. This can be plants. It can be micro-like organism like a flagellate or bacteria. It can be all species of birds. Can be spiders, or it can be a dandelion seeds. So we have been looking from different perspective, from the design perspective, that how we can look at their shape, their mechanism of motion, or we can look at their another perspective. We can look at their color, or we can look at their behavior, like the swarm behavior that we see in the small birds or the flock of the migratory birds, in order to save energy. So my focus has been at two different directions. One, it has been in the direction of the design, and another one in the direction of the saving energy.
Okay.
Which I'll talk about that more.
Yeah, absolutely. So are there ways that studying the locomotion of animals, you mentioned, like saving energy, how is that informing the robotics?
So if we look at the animals, we know that, it's better to say biological species. It can be also plants or seeds, right? So if you look at them, they are using different mechanisms to move.
Yeah.
So some of them, they have jumping capability. Some of them, they have climbing capability. Some of them, they are running, they're walking. If you go underwater, they're swimming, and there are different mechanisms for swimming, like jellyfish. Or if you look at another types of locomotion, we see like crawling. Some of the animals, they folding, like we see some birds that they fold their wings and they dive with a very high speeds in order to catch prey. So what we have been doing is to classify those type of locomotion in nature and try to learn from them to come up with a new locomotion mechanism for the robots that we are developing, which I'll show you later on.
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, I think there's so much inspiration you can take. If you think of like a peregrine falcon diving, they go so incredibly fast because they're very aerodynamic, aren't they? So you can take elements of that forward to your research.
Exactly. So that's the way that we can learn from this in order to design some types of the drones with the same capabilities, or we can basically develop morphing a structure for future airplane, which they can change their configuration or change their shape during the flight in order to take the highest efficiency.
Are there robots inspired by species on Earth, animals or plants, that can help us explore other planets?
Exactly. So that's actually half of my research is to develop this type of robot for planetary or extraterrestrial environment exploration. So if you look at in our solar system, there are like a couple of moons and the planets that we can have a potential flights there or potential use of the robotics. So this includes our moon. On moon, there is no any atmosphere there. So we have been looking at the jumping robot. We have developed robots with jumping capabilities inspired from the grasshopper in order to apply them, a swarm of them, on lunar surface because the gravity is low. There's no any atmosphere. This is the best type of the locomotion mechanism that we can have. They are more efficient than the track-based or wheel-based robots because one of the big challenge on the moon is the dust. So this jumping capability would avoid time contact with the surface of the lunar surface to avoid dust. Or if you look at the Venus, NASA has been looking at the mid altitude on Venus for like a potential flight. We have been looking at different ways that how birds they save energy through the dynamic or thermal soaring to develop drones that they can fly for a long time in the mid altitude of Venus. We have been looking at the Mars with developing different types of robots and the drones, including like a dandelion-inspired drones that we have been developing, those tiny drones which they are in a couple of grams or milligrams, which they can be dispersed on low dense atmosphere on Mars in its lava tubes to study their humidity, pressure, temperature in order to understand what's going on the subsurface on Mars. Because space agencies, they are looking at the Martian lava tubes as a potential habitat for astronauts. Because one of the big challenges on Mars is extreme radiation. And so if we go to the Mars without astronaut suits, we cannot survive more than 20 seconds. So that's the reason the researchers are looking at the subsurface in order to have an area to live. So we have been looking at Titan, we have been looking at Enceladus. We are right now developing some aquatic systems for oceanic water, which include the Europa or Enceladus, which they have water in their subsurface. So there are plenty of robots that we have developed and we're currently developing. When I say robots, mainly autonomous systems, it can be aquatic, ground-based, or aerial-based systems that they can be inspired from nature in order to do this type of missions.
What challenges come when trying to replicate some of these natural processes in robotics?
One of the big challenges that we see once you want to get inspiration from specific animals, there are multiple factors that animals they do or they have in order to conduct a specific thing. Like if you look at the birds' colorations, the wings colorations, there are many reasons. So it's from the genidomorphy points of view for attracting mate. It can be for camouflage, and the study that I'm going to talk about that is for energy saving. So one of the big challenges is know what percentage each affects the overall efficiency of the whole system. So, or if you want to find the locomotion, animals there are using different types of locomotion or combination of different locomotions. Sometimes it's really hard to replicate them. Another example I can have here is for flapping motion. So I'm designing flapping wing drones for like a decade. But the challenge is that you want to replicate the birds. Birds, they are providing flapping motion through their muscles. So we cannot replicate exactly same as muscles, so we design actuation mechanisms that can provide the same flapping motion, but still is not the same because they're not muscles. So we see this type of things that sometimes technology is not quite there in order to develop this type of systems, and sometimes it needs like in multi or interdisciplinary research. So that's the reason that I collaborate with other researchers from different groups to understand the physics of the animals to understand their behaviors and other factors. And the other thing is that there is still plenty of unknowns that we don't know about animals, about birds, about insects, about aquatics, that we are trying to discover and learn from them, see that what area of engineering we can inspire from the nature to our application that we are envisioning.
What sort of discoveries or advancements do you hope to see in the next few years in your field?
So before answering your question, I want to clarify this, that we have two terminologies here. We have bioinspiration and we have biomimetic. There are a difference between the meaning of these two words. So bioinspiration means that you inspire from nature, right? And then you try to learn from nature to come up with a design or a solution, or like a new way of saving energy and so on. So if you look at the airplanes or submarines, they are all bio-inspired, because humans, they looked at the air, they saw birds, they designed airplane, but airplane, they're not flying similar to the birds. They don't flap wings. Or the submarine is the same thing here. But biomimetic means that you mimic the nature, you replicate the nature, exactly like nature. So like those flapping wing drones I was talking about, that those are biomimic types of flying drones. So there is a trick here. There's a question: is bioinspiration, biomimicry, is always an optimized solution for engineering system? The answer is no. So there are multiple factors we should look at that. So if we look at the killer whales or dusky dolphins, they use a fish-like motion in order to locomote in underwater. But we don't see submarines do the same thing, or we don't see airplanes to flap their wings. So we cannot say that bioinspiration, biomimicry is always optimized. But if you want to design a drone in the size of insects, probably it's much more optimized to look at the mosquitoes or the flies, because I cannot design a drone that can fly like with a configuration of the quadcopters or with the wing, because they don't have enough efficiency. But we see insects flying in those
in the same way.
In the same way. So that's the reason that what we're looking at that is that there are many factors for biomimicry and bioinspiration. So we need to look at what scale we are looking at and what perspective we are looking at the nature. So because of this, if we know these things about animals, we can get the highest advantage, because right now animals or any biological species, they are in an optimum way in the current time that we see them. I mean, in the future, maybe because of the environmental change, climate change, they might like adjust themselves or evolve again, right? But here right now, in the time that we are living, those are the optimized species that we can learn from them, and they can be applied for many fields. So I'll talk about that shortly. Like there are 7 management rules inspired from the Canadian geese. So Canadian geese, they fly for 2,400 kilometers in a single day and a half, right? So it's a very long distances. So now the question is that how they manage their time, how they manage the energy or the load between themselves, how they manage these long distances, how they switch leader, who should be the leader, when they should switch the leader. There are many lessons that we can learn from Canadian geese. I, as an engineer, as a mechanical engineer and a drone-like researchers, I look at from the energy aspects of the Canadian geese. Somebody with a management degree can look at from the managing perspective and learn ideas from Canadian geese. So there is a lot that I believe that biomimicry and bioinspiration can help us right now and also in the future to optimize systems, to develop new systems. And this is the future I see for the field of the bioinspiration, biomimicry.
Are there any aquatic animals that you have worked with in your research that have inspired your designs?
So we have developed drones based on the jellyfish. but they're flying drones. Jellyfish are using a very unique way in order to generate propulsion and move underwater. We have looked at the flagellate types of locomotion, microorganisms, that they have a rotating tail in order to develop a swarm of the aquatic micro swimmers for underwater robots, for water exploration. So I'll talk about that more once I show you my slides. And so these are the current that we have been looking at that, and also fish-like robots. So there are plenty of organisms underwater that they're using unique way in order to save energy or order to move. We also looked at the amphibians like the penguins, that how penguins, they're black and white, black at the top and the white color at the bottom sides, help them to save energy while they're swimming during the daytimes in Antarctica. And this is a paper that we published last year to explaining another reason for coloration of the penguins. We have been looking at also coloration of the other aquatics or other underwater species like the killer whales, dusky dolphin, manta rays, like a swordfish. As I said, penguins, they all have a black color at the top and they have white color at the bottom side. They are usually swimmers that they swim so close to the surface of the water. The black color is exposed to the sun radiation, so it changed the flow, airflow, the water flow, the viscosity and density around them, and would help them to swim easier and save more energy while they're all swimming in the surface. So these are the area that we have explored underwater, and I'll show you in the slide, and I'll talk more about that as well.
You've also worked with a team on wing coloration and aircraft in monarch migrations in the butterflies. Can you tell me more about that?
Sure. So before that, I'll give you a background of this research. So in 2016, I started to research in this area why birds, they have different coloration. So if you look at the albatross, sooty tern, black skimmer, shearwater, they're all oceanic birds. They're flying over the ocean. If you look at from the top part of their wings, they all have black color and the bottom side is white color. If you ask biologists for the reason of the coloration, they have two reasons. Can I share my screen? So probably,
yeah, of course.
If you look at this is albatross. So you see the albatross, they have black color at the top and they have white color at the bottom side. So if you ask biologists the reason of colorations, they say that it can be for attracting mate, or it can be due for the camouflage, right? So I am from New Mexico. If I go outside with a black t-shirt during the summer, I feel more hot than having the white t-shirt, right? So the same thing happened here. Those albatross, they don't flap. They basically harness energy from the sheer wind over the ocean, which is called dynamic soaring, and they fly for months over the ocean, and they migrate for a maximum of 9,000 kilometers over the oceans without consuming any energy. These are the laziest birds in the universe because they don't do anything. They just harness energy from the available winds. So since they don't flap, the top part of the wing is exposed to the sun radiation. So the top part is absorbing more heat than the bottom side, right? Because top side is black, and black color is hotter than the white color. So once we did a very simple study, we found that there is a temperature difference, and that would change the flow patterns around them and would help them to basically reduce their drag and increase their lift. Because this heat, which is generated around at the top of them, would make would change the air density at top of them. So like a hot air balloon. So it would help them to gain extra lift. But in the same time, the black at the top and the white color at the bottom side would help them to reduce their drag while they are flying. So we developed the fundamental behind this. And this year, actually, January, we published a paper about the different reason of the black and white coloration of different birds, which we published this paper in the Journal of Bionic Engineering that explaining that how this pattern of black and white would help these birds to have a unique aerodynamic efficiency. So if you look at this picture, you see plenty of birds. Some of them, their trailing edge is black. Some of them, their wingtips are black. Some of them, they have a zebra pattern. Some of them, their top part is black. The bottom side is white. Some of them, they are pure black. So some of them, they're like half of their wing is black. They have these patterns. So each one of this, they have a unique aerodynamic characteristics. So what we did here, we got the black and white wings. We exposed them to simulated sun radiation, and we saw in the maximum sun radiation, which the birds they can receive during the midday, the temperature difference between the black and white is about 25 degrees Celsius. So what we did here, we built 5 airfoils, and one of these airfoils is GE-174, which is the airfoil of the albatross. And we put them in the wind tunnel, and we just increased the top surface temperature only for 10 degrees Celsius. And this is a lift to drag ratio or efficiency enhancement that we measure in wind tunnel. So you see that in that specific condition, it's probably more than about 150%. So that's basically what we define as an efficiency. And then what we did, we tried to explain all of those color patterns in the wind tunnel again with applying these heat films to just hitting the trailing edge to mimic this coloration. So we control the coloration with just changing the local temperatures across the wing. And we saw that each one of those color pattern, which are showed in different birds, they have a unique aerodynamic characteristics. So why we are doing this, if you look at the birds, there are many birds that their wing tips are black. If you ask biologists what are the reasons of these black pigmentations in the wing tips of birds, you will see just one answer. The black color is coming from the concentration of melanin, and the birds that are trying to have those black colors in their wingtips in order to increase the strength of the feathers in their wingtips. But since we have been doing in the research on the coloration, our hypothesis is totally different. So we have a pending patent actually right now in this area, is that this black color is hotter than the white color. So that black portion is changing the temperature in the wingtip, which change the vortex patterns across those wingtips and would help them to save more energy through the reduction of the drag. And that's actually the other reason that we are explaining of this black portion. We totally accept the other reason that biologists they say, but this can be also another reason for the coloration of wingtips. So now getting to your question about the monarch butterfly. So once I was doing research on the bird's coloration in 2017, I read a paper from a researcher from the University of Georgia, Dr. Andy Davis, which he published a paper about the coloration of the monarch butterflies. So in his paper, he mentioned that the monarchs that they have more reddish color or darker color, they have higher efficiency, and their survival rate during the migration is higher. But he basically didn't have any explanation about that. Since I was doing research on the bird's coloration, then we started to do research on the monarch butterfly. So we published the paper, then he reached out to us, and we started to collaborate together. So since last 3 years. So there are 5 different routes that monarchs are applying to fly from southern Canada to central Mexico. And the longest one is about 3,000 miles. And our study showed that there is a reason for the monarch's wing coloration. So if you look at the monarch's wings, this is a thermal video that you can see. So you see the black color is hotter. This is the black portion, shows a hotter temperature.
Yeah.
The orange color and transparent. And our question was, what are those white spots? So if you look at the monarchs, there are different families of monarchs, but these are the migratory ones. So you see the migratory monarchs, they have about 3% more white coloration than the other one. So now, I mean, we know that all these monarchs, their trailing edge is all black color. Our study in the wind tunnel showed that the wings, that they have black trailing edge, they are much more efficient than the other types of the wings from the aerodynamic perspective.
Yeah.
And also our study showed that the zebra pattern, since zebra pattern is the black, white, black, white, black, white, as you can see it here, right? There's a black, there's a white, there's a black, white. So it means that hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. So that would change the flow patterns in a trailing edge and would help them to also save more energy and increase the flight efficiency. So if you look at the monarchs, we see that they have 3% more white spots and 3% less black compared to other species.
Yeah.
Right? So we find out that there might be two reasons. One of them, which it didn't get into the paper, was that those white color can be because of as a thermal regulator, because there are natural species, right? If we what we did here, we colorized those white spots with the black color, and we saw that there is a 2-degree temperature difference. But once our paper was reviewed, we got the feedback from reviewers that those white spots, they are not near their veins, so that might not be the reason. But we had this study about this type of aerodynamic effects of this coloration. We find out that this type of coloration would help them to save more energy during the migration. I mean, it might be very small amount of saving energy, but about 82% monarchs, they glide, they soar, they don't flap. So they're exposed to sun radiation, and that would help them to basically fly easier while they migrate. So that's the work that we did with the migration. And here, to just get back to your other questions about aquatics, these are the killer whales, dusky dolphin, penguins. You see that they have the same patterns. So these are the animals that they swim so close to the water. So the top part is exposed to the sun radiation. So it gets heat. Once they go to the water, the higher temperature would change the water density and viscosity, and would help them to swim easier once they are swimming so close to the surface of water. These are the same thing for the penguins. So as you can see it here, penguins that are black and white, they usually go into the water during the daytime in Antarctica, and they swim so close to the water because that's the time that they need to save energy. And this coloration, again, with the same concept like birds, would help them to reduce their drag. This is something that I talked about, the penguins huddling as a behavior, that how penguins, they huddle, basically how they rotate, how they manage the heat. So what we got an idea about this heat management techniques by penguins huddling in order to develop future Martian habitat, because on Mars is really cold, right? The temperature is changing a lot, but it's still a cold temperature. So we have been looking at the heat management of these penguins huddling to come up with a unique way of the thermal management or heat management for the buildings in other planets. So we did some experimental study on the penguins. We also run some simulation on penguins. So this has been the research about the coloration. I hope I answered your questions.
Yeah, incredible. It's so interesting to see it in multiple species as well. You see it in the birds, you see it in the aquatic organisms, you see it in the edge of the monarch's wings. It comes up time and time again. It makes so much sense as well. But you, as a biologist, I would never have thought of it like that. But you need an engineer to come and show me about the drag and the moving efficiencies.
I mean, that's what we do. I collaborate with lots of biologists because I don't have too much knowledge about biology. So, and that's the beauty of the multi and interdisciplinary research, right? I mean, I have biologists, a collaborator, and we are engineer, and we try to look at different things that both of us are looking at from different perspectives. And once we come together, so we can make this type of research.
Is there anything practical applications that you've then taken from that research into, a synthetic organism or a robot or an autonomous system?
So regarding this coloration, the main application is for aviation industry. So you know that a small amount of energy saving or drag reduction in aviation industry is a huge difference. Like if you have a 0.00001% drag reduction in the airplanes that they're flying, it's a huge saving in money, in time, as well as in energy. And also the consequence would be less pollution as well, right? So and the main reason is that if you apply those coloration patterns, just simple painting in the airplanes, and if the small percentage of drag reduction would affect a lot in the efficiency of the airplanes from the energy perspective. So that's the main reason that we do this research, that because we want to learn from nature to explain what's happening there first, and then apply that to the different fields, including aviation industry or other like engineering fields.
Amazing. Yeah, that's so yeah, we could paint the planes in the same way as the bird's wings or the monarchs and just make a tiny difference. It would be huge overall. Yeah, exactly.
Those tiny species, those monarchs, as I said, they're flying like 3,000 miles, which is a very long distances, right? So if we learn from them how this coloration would help them, and then apply that to the drone technology or to aviation industry, so that would be a huge help from different perspectives.
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything we can learn from swarming behaviors in insects that can help us?
Exactly. So I want to show you again my slides because I have another research about. So if you look at the nature, we see plenty of this type of behavior. We see the flock of the birds, you have the swarm of the small tiny birds or insects, we see the herd of animals, and we see the school of the fish. And I already talked about the hardening of penguins as well. It's the same concept here. So there are multiple reasons why animals, they show this type of behavior. So one can be for finding food. You see this in the migrating birds, specifically small birds or oceanic birds. If you look at the small birds, once they are doing this type of swarm, so if one of them see the food, all of them to try to follow that bird that find the food. So that's the reason that many birds, they dive the same time to the water. They're like the birds, the oceanic birds are flying, they see the fish, the school of the fish. One of the birds see the fish, it dive to catch the fish. The other birds, they do the same thing, right? So it can be for finding food. The second one can be for anti-predator adaptation mechanism. So those small birds, they make those swarms in order to scare the predator birds. So that's another reason. The third reason, which has been my research area, is aerodynamic benefits. So birds, they try to make this swarm or make this flock in order to save energy to this formation flight. So now I want to show you, we have a national park. It's the second largest refuge in the United States, called Bosque de la Apache. Is like 8 miles to my campus. So every year, 300,000 migratory birds from Canada, they come here, and we go there. Actually, we study them. It's a video I have captured. You see that the birds, they fly first, and they try to form a formation flight. So this formation flight is known for centuries. The birds, they are flying together in the flock, and we know that the birds, they are doing this type of behavior in order to save energy. So the first bird, the leader, is flying in the undisturbed air. Once it's flap, so it creates the upwash region. The follower birds, they're trying to take advantage from that upwash region, and they all save energy. So there is one thing that was missed for centuries, and we were the first researchers that actually we found out that, and we tried to learn from this, and we come up with the reason for that, is that the birds usually in the middle position, these are the birds that they take the most advantage from this flock. So they save more energy because those are taking advantage from this opposite of the leader birds as well as the tail birds. So it's basically the lead bird and the tail birds, they consume more energy. So then what happened, and we observed in nature, that the birds at the middle, they go to the both side. They go to the tail and they go take the leadership. So they switch their positions. So we developed fundamental behind this, and we actually explain how this happened. And our simulation showed that the birds which are in the mid position, they save more energy than the other birds. So we know birds, they have different age, different level of experience, different level of health. They are flying as a families. So how they decide who should be the leader, how they switch the leadership. So we try to apply machine learning techniques in order to understand this. So if you have birds that they have different level of experience, different level of health, different size, some of them are juvenile, some of them are older. So who should be the leader and how they should switch? So we developed this, and we find out that the birds that adjust themselves in order to have the highest efficiency, and at the same time, they can all get advantage. So like the birds that is the leader, it gets tired, go to the middle position, so it can basically save more energy. Or the birds that they are sick, they go in the middle position to save more energy. And once you're doing this, and once we run those simulations, we find that if they don't switch, they just fly. They just go in this amount. You see the dash line. But once they start to balance the load between themselves, their efficiency can be enhanced maximum 44% extra. So this means that they can go 44% more. So once we did this modeling on like Canadian geese, we find out that if they don't switch their position, they cannot go more than 1,500 kilometers. So how they can go 2,400 kilometers? Because they manage the load between themselves. And we actually get the exact same number in our research. We published a paper in the Swarm Intelligence. I collaborated with the biologists from University of the Rhode Island in the United States, Dr. Frank Hepner. He's a pioneer of the Canadian geese, about 55 years research in the formation flight, and then we actually worked together in this project. So this is a video I captured from that national park. You see that how many birds, like the snow geese, Canadian geese, cranes, they make this formation flight, and they fly together. We did a lot of CFD analysis in order to understand what is the optimum overlap between these birds. We actually did research on that. We run some simulation in that area as well. We also developed some experimental studies in order to understand how each bird they save energy depending on their locomotion. So as you can see it here, these are connected to the load cell, and we are measuring the load between those birds. And here we are trying to understand that how birds save energy through their flapping motions, through this flock. What is the flapping frequency? What is the maximum overlap? What is the phase difference between their flapping motion? And this is the actual sound, actually. And we got a very interesting result in our experimental study, as what we see in the nature and as an analytical solution, that the birds in the middle position, they save more energy. So as you can see it here, more thrust means less drag. So we also did some flow visualization to understand what exactly happened. You see that upwash regions and the vortices happens in their wingtips.
Yeah.
So this flow visualization help us. These are the actually two flapping wings. Dart doesn't, but here you can see it. Here is the interaction between those upwash regions and the vortices that those birds they are creating during their formation flight. So that was the research that we did in the birds. The same thing happens in the smaller birds. They take some like advantage and benefits from this for cluster swarm. And besides this energy saving, there is another area which I can show you we have been working on. We recently published a paper, is about 150 pages in the Drone Journal. There are 350 optimization algorithms that researchers, they have developed based on natural organisms. terrestrial, planet, microorganism, insects, aerials, and aquatics. So these are all optimization algorithms from like computer science perspective and a mathematical perspective. So what we have been trying to do to map those bio-inspired algorithms to the drone technology or aerospace industry. So how we can learn from them. So one of the area is particle swarm optimizations, which we talked about swarm of the insects. There is an optimization technique which is called PSO or particle swarm optimization, which you can basically optimize different systems. It can be design of airfoil. It can be design of the airfoil of the hydrokinetic turbines, which we did research on that, and we have a publication. Or it can be anything. So, or it can be the swarm behavior of drones. So here, that's something, another aspect of this swarm that we can learn in order to increase the efficiency of those drone systems.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for sharing all your research with me. It's been wonderful. I've learned so many different things.
Very nice meeting you, and we'll be in touch. Let me know if you had any follow-up question.
Brilliant. Thank you so much.